Hello, friends and foes. Today you are tuning into the Endgame, where this week's topic of choice is VR chat, meeting people in VR, and then the scary, scary world of IRL, where there is no respawn button. Take it away, gentlemen.
Thank
you.
That was great.
Yay. Yeah.
That is the worst thing about real life, isn't it? You can't respawn. If that was just not true, oh man, there'd be a load taken off.
That's what cell phones are for. It's like, oh, I got to take this call, and you walk and take the call. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
So you guys want to talk about meeting people in real life, which we've already heard is kind of a scary thing.
Yeah.
We were joking about how scary it was, but if we're honest with each other, we've all met somebody in real life before, and we've sort of gotten used to it. So why are we talking about it? What's interesting about meeting people in this circumstance?
Do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think basically, this kind of idea. I guess we can this idea of meeting. You get to know someone in virtual reality and have interactions in the virtual world, and then meeting them in real life. What is that like, and how does that translate? And I think as VR chat and the virtual reality community continues to grow more and more, it's going to be a more frequent occurrence. So trying to dive into understanding the dynamics and why that happens and what it feels like for people. There's all sorts of different scenarios. And I know that Atari and I met each other in virtual reality first. If you want to kind of tell that story.
So it was kind of funny. So Syke and I live in the same city. In fact, there's even a couple people out in the audience who also live in the same city that we know. But we went to the same VR meetup. You took over the local VR meetup after it changed hands about a year ago, maybe about a year ago. And so we were hanging out and we were talking at that VR meetup. And then this was back in like the 5.3 days of VR chat. And you said, oh, I was talking to this guy who had an Iron Giant avatar. Now I know there's a lot of Iron Giant avatars out now, and it's a relatively like regular avatar people kind of see pop in and out. But at the time, I legitimately think I was the only person who had an Iron Giant avatar because I basically had to make it and build it. And so
this was years ago too.
This was ages and ages and ages ago that this had happened. And so it kind of dawned on us when he said, oh yeah, I saw this awesome Iron Giant avatar. I was like, dude, that's actually me. And we didn't know that we knew each other first. We technically we knew each other in VR before we knew each other in real world. But we didn't like meet in VR and say, hey, we should meet in real world. We just happened to also meet in the real world. And I kind of like, it sounds really strange right now. In the current early days of VR, that sounds really kind of like a 1 in a million shot that would happen. But I grew up in an era of like AOL Instant Messenger. And it became such a hotly used platform that you would meet people in real life or like schoolmates or whatever, and you'd ask them what their screen name was so you could be friends with them on AOL Instant Messenger. So if you look at it from that perspective, as this platform gets bigger and bigger with a population of users, then it's not only very likely that you'll meet people that you've met in VR, but it's also one of those things where if you met them in real life, you could almost, maybe one day you'll assume that they're also in VR and ask for the screen names. It's kind of like asking someone if they're on Facebook. It kind of got to this duh peak where it's like, duh, they're on Facebook. Everyone's on Facebook, or, and so I think I hope that we're eventually going to get to that point. So we kind of have to know what that's like. It can be weird. I think it's a little, I don't have a really good word for it other than I think it's kind of, the initial idea is it's a little vulnerable, because a lot of people will have a completely different personality in VR. There's a psychology to it of like, oh, I can be this completely different person who I can't be in the real world. And some of that's shown by just the avatars that they choose, but it can be shown by their personality, or maybe you're just like some dork who's running around trolling people, but then, that username sticks and everyone knows, oh yeah, and then you meet someone in the real world like, oh yeah, I ran into you, you're a putz. I don't even want to know you in the real world anymore. I don't think that's ever happened yet.
Or true to the person? Is it the VR version, the person you met in the internet, or are they more constrained by reality and more uncomfortable?
That's a deeper question than I know how to answer, because really, like, I don't have too much a divide, right? Like my divide but I work in VR full time. Like that's my profession. That's what I do. So for me to have a divide between VR and real world is kind of an unfair thought. But if I think that's something that they would have to answer. You know, the people who are joining us in here, I'd like to know that. Are they more their real selves in VR, or are they more the selves that they want to be in VR but feel like they can't be? And then what happens when that crosses over and you inevitably make a friend like Psych in the real world, who I see at least once a month. We see each other.
Yeah.
So like I got to be accountable and not be like a complete prick around him, right? Like I can't like spam
Real
this guy
world
and like troll
Or
on him,
you
you
can
know?
just be in virtual world and real world, you know. You can.
Yeah.
Do you want to take this?
I just have to keep it consistent, right?
Yeah. Well, also I think that one thing is that, you know, people in virtual reality are able to be whoever they want, but that still has an impact on who they are in the real world. Like that's still that's still part of their self that they're expressing. And so I think that, like, from my experience, like going to conferences like Oculus Connect and things like that and meeting people, now that's a biased sample because maybe some people, maybe that's a certain type of person who would come to that kind of an event. But those, I've seen that, you know, the VR chat personality that I've gotten to know, and these are people I had known for years, like Mr. Q, Cubed Paradox, you know, people like that who I'd known for years in VR chat before I met them in real life. And we were all walking along from the conference, like, to the VR chat house, and it felt like we were walking along in a virtual world. It felt like we were in a virtual world, like walking just as we had for years. So it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like you feel like you're actually with the same people and you have this sense of them. And so it was actually it was a strange experience, but when they talk and the voice, it's like, it's kind of real.
Well, and you took a step further by like really adopting the real you in VR, right? Like that's something that most people don't do. And there was what was the conscious decision of doing that? Why did you choose to do that, I guess?
Yeah, so Mike Alger from Google has been in VR chat for years as well, and he was the first person to have a 3D scan of his body, and I asked him that same question, and he said that he felt like his experiences were more authentic when he was his own self in virtual reality, and like, this is a 3D scan of me, so I look like this in real life, and I did that, and I can't be any other avatar. Now that I have my 3D scan, if I go into another avatar, I feel like I'm wearing a mask. Whereas if it's possible for me,
no offense to my mask, is that it?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, that, and people enjoy it and stuff. But for me, ever since I've gotten a taste of what it's like to know that I'm representing myself in VR, I haven't been able to go back. It just feels less. It feels just like mediocre compared to And I see Catapult. You're giving the thumbs up because I know that
you're not even
avatar.
Like compliment yourself or custom like. What, having a flower or a wing or just like a fire hand or something? Just something.
I just suck at all that. So that's the issue there. You know, if anyone wants to customize my avatar, you know, I'll but yeah.
So you're talking about Mike Alger.
Yeah.
Oh well, let's do the poll. So let's say it's a thumbs up since we're in VR. Thumbs up if this version of you, in VR is the more realistic, the more true version of you. How do we ask that question? Are you more true to yourself in VR? That's a thumbs up. And thumbs down if you're actually more true to yourself when you're out there in the real world outside of here.
Right? Okay. And so let's do a count of 3.
You can't abstain. You have to make a vote.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
I'm seeing a lot more green.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what about
3 thumbs down?
So does anyone thumbs down want to say, or does anyone want to say like why they voted the way they did? Thumbs down people.
Yeah, I would be curious about the thumbs down people too.
Yeah,
something. It's a little bit counterintuitive.
I can't see your name.
If you're comfortable, like if you.
Your name's behind. Someone. There we go.
Well, I do a lot of impressions, so like, I guess when I come here, I like, kind of don't want to be myself, you know.
But you're tired of doing impressions in the real world?
Well, I don't do impressions in the real world. I just talk like a normal person, you know?
And so you're doing them here?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not doing them right now. Yeah.
So that makes sense. So it's not that you're uncomfortable being yourself in the real world. You're comfortable there. And then here, it's sort of an escape and it like you have the option to now present a different version of yourself. It's like an extra place to go, and so you can explore this other thing. Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me.
Catapult, did you have something?
Catapult?
Yeah, personally, I find I can be myself easier in VR than I can in real life, because in real life people will have certain expectations of you, of you, and all that, and you got to try and live up to some of those expectations, kind of thing, and responsibilities, and so on and so forth. Where here you're pretty much just a free spirit, and you do your own thing.
Yeah, it's
but
easier.
actually, so Minerva had a comment first, I think, right, or someone over there.
Oh,
Yeah, I was just like, for me, I find that my personality, my baseline personality remains the same in both IRL and in VR chat. I find that for me, because I can easily choose who I get to be around, I get to play on slightly different sides of my personality. A lot of the times in real life, I don't show exactly how nerdy I am or how much I know about things, because I just want to like roll my eyes and say freaking normies and like walk out of the room sometimes. Whereas in VR chat, you get to select and you get to meet people and you're just like, oh. And on the other side, VR chat prevents me from like knocking somebody over the head or like punching them in the arm for being like stupid and stuff like you would with like IRL friends, you know?
So you're constrained by societal rules, and I don't know, something like that.
and thankfully, violence
Less
doesn't exist in VR
rules,
chat.
more
That's what I took out from
mindsets,
that.
I guess.
Real physical
Yeah,
violence.
yeah, like the mainstream culture or whatever that. Yeah, like it sort of oppresses you. You can't,
Yeah,
you
very
can't
much
really
makes me
be yourself.
roll my eyes a couple of times.
I think that's got to be true about a lot of people, right? Like, I think a lot of people, like, you can't really be yourself out there in the real world. You have to play the game a little bit to, you can't be, a screaming maniac or tell the same kind of jokes or
I've
use the
seen
same
some.
language.
That's a
you're
very
not
real
anonymous,
thing.
too. In the
It's
real
true.
world,
It's
know?
true. But I'm not really anonymous here in this world. But that was a conscious decision not to be anonymous, right?
Yeah. If
And there's
you
plenty
want
of
to be,
people
you
in.
can be.
If you want to be, you can. If you don't want to be, I mean, everyone knows my real name. Like, they know I'm Lee Keebler. They know that I live in Nashville. Like, that's been talked about. That's been discussed. They know about the company. They know, because I work in this medium. I've just chosen not to have the luxury of like, oh, this is just a fun thing that I do. Like, no, I believe that these type of, gatherings, these type of groups, these type of events and streams are where momentum builds in a new platform, right? And so someone like yourself has to be able to stand up and be like, no, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I'm studying. I believe in this, and this is where it's going. And so there has to be a group of people who just ultimately lose their anonymity so that more people can come in and have it, which is kind of a weird thing to really think about. But that's how you promote ideas. Ideas have to be promoted by real identities, and then they can be enjoyed by everybody.
Do they though? I want to push back on that a little bit, because like Nomano, like your real name isn't really thrown out there that much yet. We host, and maybe my name is on my Twitter or something, but like we host Endgame and lots of people promote ideas here. So I guess like, can you be anonymous, or is it that like you have an identity that's not anonymous, such as Nomano? It's just not tied as directly to your like real identity or something.
And now you're hitting onto a much like broader question that I've been asking myself for like the past month, and that is, what happens when that name, this avatar, extends past who you are in the real world? Are we approaching this question of a person's impact potentially having a stronger impact in the virtual world than they do in the real world? And then what does that mean for them socially when the real world, maybe they're bagging groceries at Kroger, but they're in VR chat and they run a really popular Twitch stream and a really popular show, and they're adding new users all the time, and they've become an identity. Or I've been watching and I've been going into some of the, you and I both live in Nashville. It's a music city. And so we're both very used to the idea of karaoke bars and open mic nights and songwriters nights. And
the karaoke here is different, but yeah.
Well,
like
yeah, because in
insane.
Nashville, karaoke is a contact sport, and
Yeah.
not everyone wins. But it's a stronger question of like, okay, what happens when those people start, like, there are some really good singers in the open mic nights. I've watched them, and I can sit there and watch them perform, and they're really good, and they start creating this identity, and maybe their real world life they're not doing what they want, but if that image becomes more them, where's the line get blurred where that image is more
Right.
who they want to be than who they actually are, so therefore they just become who they want to be, but it lives here with these screens floating in front of our eyes in three-dimensional space, because I'm just in my office,
Yeah. Well,
but I'm actually here.
I think also some of the two things. One is the performance episode that we had last week, I think touches on this, which is that, and the idea that we're always performing even socially. So then we're performing with this mask on, so we feel more free to do what we want. But also, there's the kind of, the performance is kind of like, people can choose how they want to express themselves. And the streamers, I think, is a good example, but also, because, people who maybe hadn't been that popular beforehand all of a sudden become popular. I think the transgender community is a whole other example of where someone becomes in the virtual world, their identity becomes more congruent with their internal sense of self. Yeah, like we've had the episode about that. So I think that's like, yeah, that's a really strong kind of example of where when you're in this screen and in the virtual world, your identity is more congruent with who you want to be, or you identify more with your virtual self than your real self. I see Catapult, Gur, and Rubik. So
I want to go Rubik first, but like, can we speculate into the future? Like, let's assume that it's going to go down this road, and we are going to sort of Ready Player One and whatever, and
if it doesn't, I made the wrong job choice, and I'm gonna be bagging groceries. Yeah, I'm absolutely counting on it.
Assuming that happens, like, oh shit, I'm losing my train of thought. Never mind. Let's just go to the questions. Rubik actually had a comment a couple ago, so I want to get to him first.
I mean, I'm glad Site brought up performing, because for the extreme majority of users, there's nothing at stake. They can be whoever they want to be. They don't have to link who they are in the real world and who they want to be in the real world, the VR chat world. But as someone who needs to uphold some sort of like to behave, I need to be respectful in every single way I interact with people, because I have something behind me that I need to respect, and I can't behave the way I want. And if I do, I may risk losing my job. So I can't be free in VR, if that's the question. Like, I cannot feel free, but it's a good thing for me, because that's I want to do that. I want to be that person, but it's not who I may be in real life with my friends, for example. Like, I may be more loose with my friends. I may joke more. I may swear a lot more. In a VR chat, I can't, because that's a job. So I need to be respectful, and I have an image to keep. So
oh, fuck.
In some ways,
you can't swear in VR chat. You can't be free.
No, I can, but I don't want to, because
Yeah, but you're connected, so you have more restraints put on you than the rest of us.
Yeah, I think so. But
for most of us, this is a completely free place.
And I think streamers also doing the same way. They have rules to respect. They have like a terms of service they have agreed to, so they cannot just go ahead and do whatever they want to do, because it's just for the sole reason it's a virtual world. There's no consequences or anything. They have rules to respect, as in the real world. So we're not in like I don't know. It's maybe not a comparison to do with Second Life, but in VR chat, we have a code of conduct. We can't just do whatever we want. So it's not like complete mayhem. If people wanted to say what they wanted to say, if they wanted to do what they wanted to do all the time, like, you can't run with a naked avatar. You can't say the N-word. There's tons of like rules you have to respect still. So it's not. I think to me, it's more than the real world, because we can actually enforce these rules constantly, and we can't really be that free, at least in the public instances. So.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point in the sense of like we seem to think that like, oh, we've got all this freedom and we can be whoever we want, but there are still some rules, like he's saying, like you can't upload certain avatars, you can't build certain rooms, you can't run around saying certain things, you can't run around pushing like the SDK to the limits and doing things like avatar steals and things like that. Like it isn't the Wild West exactly. It's pretty wide open. They've done a really good job of allowing. I personally believe they've done a good job of allowing it to be a really wide open place where people can express themselves. But I think they've promoted it in a pretty healthy way, while really being certain not to allow people to completely destroy the civility of VR chat, so to speak.
Yeah.
I feel like it's still relatively civil.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gerd, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did actually. Well, comment/question. Here, step forward. Oh, okay. Hello. Hi, everybody. So my question is more about what you think about if there's any crossover between what's going on now in VR chat and how people react here, and how they feel whenever they play, let's say, an MMO like World of Warcraft, where the main idea is a power fantasy. Do you think that there's some essence of a power fantasy to have here in its own strange way because of anonymity? You can really be who you want to be and not have to worry about outside repercussions. Now, by that, I, of course, am not including either Psych, Atari, or myself for that matter, because, I don't really change when I go inside of VR and outside, but that's because I'm in the same boat that I don't really hide who I am. So I was just wondering if you think there's any strong crossover there, or if you think this is a whole other monster altogether.
I didn't actually play a lot of MMOs growing up. That wasn't me, so I can't easily answer that question.
I didn't. I touched World of Warcraft for half a second, but you played.
Oh yeah, lots of it. So wait, what is the question is about? I'm not sorry. I'm not
the question was more about what you thought
if what is happening now in VR chat with anonymity, the feeling people get of the feeling that they have there, like it's the wrong word, but I'm gonna say the power fantasy for this, of saying like you can be whatever you want to be, whether it's similar to the power fantasy you get in World of Warcraft, or if it's another feeling altogether.
I think for some people it is. I think I think everyone has this innate want to be liked, right? And for the most part, people want that validation of who they are and the things that they appreciate, and that's why I built the world that I built. That's the reason why you have the avatar that you have. Like there are things about our personalities that we want to bring into here to find other people who have those same appreciations. And when those numbers of appreciations go up and a person becomes, let's say they become popular, right? And now they're a popular person inside of VR chat. It's up to that person to make sure it doesn't go to their head. But I don't know. It would probably continue to drive that person to spend more time in VR. Sure, I could absolutely see that. That's part of this whole like crossover, making sure that you keep some feet grounded into the real world with the people that you interact with, because you can't live in here. Like it's. I mean, I guess you can, but I'm asking people to recognize it's not healthy. And to be able to separate that and be okay with and be, you should be as happy with your real world person as you are your virtual person, and try to keep those things as equally balanced, just out of your own mental health and your own mental well-being. I think that's important, and not letting it go to your head. That would be the thing that worries me most about VR chat is actually that. I think that's what worries me most. It's not about how far will it go. Will people become better or worse people? I think people are going to be exactly who they are. But I do have this concern about how much time someone will spend in it. And if I watch people go in and out of VR who've never tried VR every day, and the one that hits me the most is watching people going in and out of Tilt Brush. because everyone's the exact same the first time they play with tilt brush, right? They just like throw colors in the air, and it's like they're 5 years old again, and they're discovering crayons or finger paints. And frankly, they're adults or they're young adults, and they would, if you handed them crayons, they would just like hand them back to you in the real world. But as soon as it's in VR and they think they're by themselves, they have this like freedom of creativity and expression and all this stuff. And every single person I've ever put through this, and I've watched you put people through, they love it. It's this open arena of feeling of creativity that they haven't had since they were 5. That's not the important part. The important part is watching their face when they take the headset off, because sometimes they'll take the headset off and they come out and they're just absolutely elated and they're just all smiles. They're like, wow, that was the best thing I've ever seen. I could see like how I'd want to do that every day. That's amazing. It's really cool. It's a really good, positive experience. That's a good thing. But then the other reaction that I've seen is people taking off the headset and they immediately get slapped in the face with like, oh, I'm back to this reality. And maybe they weren't really happy with their current life or their current situation. And all of that comes flooding in all at once as soon as they step out of tilt brush. I don't know why tilt brush for me has been the one that like shows that the most, but I've seen people take off the headset and it's just like,
yeah,
that's not healthy,
Yeah, that's something. Well, I think it's interesting because I've been working with patients who have severe, problems in the real world and have addiction and like heroin addiction and alcohol addiction and things like that. And like that's part of the therapeutic property of VR that we're seeing, is that when someone goes in the virtual world and they come out, they do feel better in the virtual world. And actually, if you deliver therapy to them when they're in the virtual world, when they come out and they're in that state of shock, they're actually potentially this will probably be like my dissertation, is to prove potentially that they're able to apply what they learned in the virtual world to the real one and have like more effective therapy take place. But I think
that's a great way to bring, like, because there's a lot of positives that happen inside of these headsets. There's a ton of positives that I've seen happen inside of these headsets. People that I've connected with, just watching people kind of like be free to talk about their own, who they are, what makes them happy, and things like that. But to bring that happiness, bring that positivity like you're talking about, or even like in your sense of really intense therapy back into the real world, so we can connect with each other, because each single person who's standing in this room is a very real person, and we tend to forget that. It's really easy for me to look at any one of these characters and not think of them. I mean, hell, our camera is a person. But it's easy to
Yay!
He has a name.
But he is.
But also,
I think you're more than a camera.
Add a point that I think the
a ghoster.
I think I think VR compared to like getting back to Gur's point, question, I think the difference between like World of Warcraft or even Facebook and this is that those are games, and actually Gur just gave a whole talk in our meetup about games and constraints and how games are made and stuff. And like, I think what's cool about the VR chat is that like it's not these artificial constraints and limitations. Like Facebook has a news feed and you have presentation of your information, but Facebook completely controls who sees it and how many people see it, and they can control how many people respond to you. But this is a more authentic exploration of the self within the virtual context, because you're actually able to come in and there's no constraints placed and you're able to do whatever you want. And I think that's an important freedom, that it's that even though we're in the technologically mediated world, there's not code as much code that's determining who we can be and how we experience this reality. So that I think that's a freeing thing for people. And Catapult, I know you've been.
So to answer your
Shadow
question,
too.
This is 5 times better than World of Warcraft. I think the validation you receive in VR.
Yes.
Concise.
I think.
All right. There also
so-
Shadow had a comment, but
Yeah. So to say that really quick is that I think they're two separate kinds of. As you both were talking, it kind of just hit me that they're probably two separate forms of gratification you have, because one's a power fantasy in that you're slaying giant monsters. It's the pinnacle of this is who you want to be kind of feeling. Well, here it's more of a. Here it's more of a kind of a breakdown of social interaction rather than achievement interaction, I guess you could say.
I mean, we're gonna, as soon as Playmaker releases, I think that bridge gets gapped. People are gonna start
That's
making
also
more
true.
games when we start having games and stuff like that. There's gonna be, we're seeing it in Mr. Whiskers. People are taking that leaderboard crazy seriously, right?
Shit.
Where'd Sight go? Bye, Sight.
He's dead.
Oh well, hopefully he'll
Yeah,
come back.
Um,
Leaderboard's exciting.
yeah, no, but the leader,
Sight's dead. No.
he'll come back. So the leaderboards are kind of like the first iteration of that. Oh yeah, I'm on the leaderboard, power trip, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the competition can bring out good in people, and it is kind of nice that it lined up at the same time as Ready Player One was coming out as in the theaters, and so people kind of they were able to kind of live out that fantasy world a little bit, but also to see how they would stack up. A lot of people know that I was the builder of the last world, and no, I do not know anything about the next world. Stop asking me. I legitimately don't know. But what did I just say? I don't
Your
know.
questions better be on the stream, Ghoster. If you're muted on the stream, you can't ask questions. When Sykes not here, you're out of control.
So no.
All right, he's coming back.
But that idea of like the leaderboard, people got really competitive over that, and you can go to a world and see your name up there, and I think that there is something important about that, and we're going to see more of that as gamified options, or even like people like myself start really taking the rooms and saying, okay, so here's my limited set of tools. How far can I push this? I want to build a puzzle or a game or something like that. So we're starting to see that, and as those grow, I think we're seeing a lot more positivity. Catapult, what was your question? And then I want to go to Shadow after this, because I know Shadow had something.
A while ago, you mentioned about the guy, during the day in real life, he packs groceries or whatever, and then he comes in here and does streaming and whatnot. And in a way, I very much agree with that. Because, unless you're doing what you love doing in real life to earn a living, then you need an escape. You got to have some fun. Work is misery. So you need that to put food on the table, pay your rent, mortgage, whatever. And then what you do is you come in here and you do something special, something that a lot of people will enjoy, whether it's streaming. Personally, I do improv on Sunday nights. Would I do it in real life? Probably not. I'm too bloody shy. But
So
doing
why are
it
you
in
shy?
here,
Yeah, what's the difference there? Why are you shy in real life, but you're not shy here? Because again, each one of these is a person, and a person that you have not a good likelihood, but a potential likelihood that you might bump into him in real life. So why does the shyness factor change from here to the real world for you?
well, in a real world, I'm kind of like socially dysfunctional. I have nothing in common with anybody. I don't follow sports unless it's Formula One or auto racing, which not too many people I know like. That kind of stuff.
Sports than I follow.
And I don't care about any of the professional, mainstream sports, baseball, football, hockey, basketball, couldn't care less, and so on and so forth. But the thing is, actually, I was really nervous. I'd say the first 2 or 3 times I did improv, and I did open mic night a few times with a little comedy thing. And the first few times I was scared. I was sweating. I was just, a nervous wreck. But then especially with improv, because I've done it quite a few times. Same thing with Zerkron. He's actually quite good at it. Once you break through that barrier, I guess you would call it, it becomes easier the more you do it. And now I really enjoy it. Is it
I
replacing
wonder if
real
that won't
life?
cross
Heck,
over.
no.
That's what
Yeah,
I was
but
going to ask. Yeah.
It's like, no.
Will it cross over? Will you become a performer in real life a little bit more than you used to be?
Well, I've always been kind of like, I guess the smart ass or the Mr. Funny of the crowd kind of thing.
Like the
At work,
class clown.
Yeah, pretty much. I used to, at work, I used to make people laugh, whether it was on the two-way radio, 'cause I worked in a rail yard, or just in a lunchroom or whatever. But it's kind of like, it's like at work, there again, on the radio. I'm not facing anyone, so I can come up and let my imagination run wild and say some really weird shit. Whereas, with a boss, I would kind of mellow out a bit, and whatnot. But It's the same thing in VR. It's yes, you are real people. I know you are real people, and my job is to try and make you laugh. I job. It's not a job. It's a passion. I enjoy it, and the more I
It's
can
your
make you
honor.
laugh, the happier I am. You know, it's kind of like that's the way I see it, and to me, it's not. Anything that's going to affect me in real life. I'm the same guy in real life. I just come in here every Sunday night and just have a blast.
So what happens in a scenario, because this is what this entire talk is about, what happens in a scenario where it does enter your real life, meaning like maybe like Psych, who is evidently having technical difficulties, so we're just going to keep on rolling here. If he does something in if he does something in VR chat, or if you do something in VR chat, and this is obviously on a Twitch stream, what happens if then someone in your real life, for whatever reason, maybe they're looking into VR chat and they're like, hey, I saw you on this Twitch stream, and I saw someone was Twitch streaming your improv. You were really good. That was really funny. Like that is a potential conversation that could happen in real life. I mean, for me, it's something that I've got to take into consideration all the time, because I work with Mr. Slosh and Gur. They both see me every day in office in real life, and I've got to be able them like they very well could watch any Twitch stream with me in it, and there's not really any, but you know, that's other than like I know that they've watched Gunter's Universe, right? And I was on Gunter's Universe twice, and
Were you vulgar?
no, not really, but that's just not really in my personality. I think I'm probably more vulgar in the office than I am in VR chat. I don't know why.
Can confirm.
Yeah. I am. But I think that's because maybe in the office there's more at stake than in VR chat, so I'm not like trying to hit home points. You know what I mean?
But for you, it's just a little bit closer, like, you know, connected. Like for a lot of people, like Catapult, and I'm sure a lot of people here feel that there is a complete separation between who I am in VR chat and who I am in the real world. No one in the real world is ever going to meet me. You know, it's,
right.
I want to get to Shadow because
Shadow. Yeah, sorry, man.
I want to get to.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm a bit of a crunch for time, so I could try to keep it short. But on what he was talking about people coming out of tilt brush and something like that, and feeling like that difference in the real world. I see that all the time working for arcade, like hundreds of people, you know, every month, and it's like you can see the difference of when they play a game that's really immersive and that they actually do things that are not necessarily impossible in real life, but are highly unlikely to be able to do in real life. When they play games like, you know, Skyfront, where you're flying around, or Richie's Plank Experience, where, you know, jumping off of a plank on a tall building, or even Smashbox, where you're playing dodgeball, but really intensely. You know, when they come out of these games and see real life, they're like, oh, okay, what's this? They actually view the VR world as more freeing and more empowering, you know, to be able to do things. It's weird to be able to like teleport in VR, but once you get out of the headset, you're like, oh, I wish I could teleport some more, you know. So I see it from the aspect of from the perspective of people who go into VR together. Like there might be whole groups that go in together in VR. Once they in the arcade, they're like kind of, you know, a little laid back, or they even might be very friendly, sociable to each other in real life. But when they get into the virtual worlds, it's almost like different personalities of themselves come out in the game.
Absolutely.
You know,
Mr. Slosh, I hope
and that's a huge thing. Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Slosh, I'm going to talk about you for a little bit. So and I can do this because I can do this. So
my permission.
Do it.
Mr. Slosh has the same screen name. I think you have the same screen name in Rec Room, right? Well, that was dramatic. So Mr. Slosh in real life is one of the calmest, chillest guys you'll ever meet. Like super chill. He happens to be our director. The blocky yellow guy. Yeah. He's really, really chill. He doesn't even talk a lot. But he's also a really talented developer on our team. He's our director of development. The thing that's funny about him is he's absolutely almost to a dangerous level addicted to Rec Room. I was like, really? Rec Room? Of all things, Rec Room? Okay. And so I went into his office one day when he was playing Rec Room, and then I watched this really mild-mannered person just go ham on a bunch of kids with paintball guns. I mean, he was a flying badass. I've never seen anything like it. And it was a completely different personality of... Yeah, we hear you. You're back.
Yeah, he's alive.
It's
Your mic's picking
static.
up a lot of noise.
Yep, just static.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Let's ignore him until he can speak.
Okay, cool.
Pretend he's not here.
So I mean, like that's a really good example of something that I've seen. Like, I know Mr. Slosh really well. We've known each other for years now, and watching him play a VR shooter brings out a completely different personality. I mean, I'm not saying anything that's wrong, correct?
You animal.
I think he's nodding.
He's nodding. He doesn't talk much. I don't know what to tell you. But if you give him a paintball gun, he's a machine.
No,
it's insane.
I'm reminded of the Hollis week. So
move much right now because I'm having quite a bit of performance issues because I didn't plug in the network cable, so everything is it's slightly uncomfortable and the sound is weird. So I'm trying to be still and quiet so I don't miss anything.
I'm having audio delayed and glitchy audio.
you should try doing block avatars. Block everybody.
Yeah.
Oh.
Or just go stand in the corner and look at the wall. That'll help.
Been there, done that.
Rubik,
I was saying, it
does
reminds
Rubik-
me of the Hollow Suite. Like I just finished Deep Space Nine, and O'Brien and Bashir go in there to like go on, the Alamo or these little adventures. And I think it's where they're like, you go and your id comes out, right? Like that's going to be a necessary part of us where in the future, we're all this escapism we're talking about, like when it's ultimately free, we're all going to need that sense of like really digging down into our subconscious and just going for it. Who were you pointing at? Is
I
somebody
thought
over there ready to talk?
Rubik had his hand up.
I think this idea of the person, usually kid, going into a virtual world and suddenly changing his personality or what he does and he says it's not new to any of us in the room because it's been portrayed in books and movies, TV shows, and even video games, anime for like the longest time ever. The idea of being able to transport yourself into a magical world where suddenly the rules don't matter and you're free to do whatever you want. So I think everybody has had, it's like a dream almost, like being able to go to a place where you're free to do anything, to fly, to fight dragons, to be like a gigantic robot. I think VR chat is going to help those people live those dreams to an extent, but I don't think it's going to replace lives as quickly as we think it is. We still need to go to work. We still need to eat. We still need to sleep. There's still all these problems that are going to always bring us back to the real world. And I think everybody's aware of this. And that's why everybody's a bit taken aback at how difficult it is to actually, be who you want to be all the time, because it's difficult also. Like maybe streamers is the complete opposite way, but it's like acting away for 10 hours a day is, difficult psychologically speaking. It's I don't know. It's what's the word I'm looking for? It's draining, mentally draining. Like to always act differently that you're used to in the real world or even virtually. Like the two cross. Yes, it's performing, but to like a wider extent because we have different tools to perform. It's not only voice and movements. It's tools we put like it's you create particles, you create avatars. Like you can perform in many other ways that you could in the real world, and it's going to be even more as times passes. So I think everybody's aware that everybody in VR that you meet might be a completely different person than they are in the real world. I don't think anybody's fooled by this. Like you can meet really cool people and then realize that the people you meet are much calmer in the real life, like you said. So, and it's been true for the people I've met in VR and then suddenly met in real life. Everybody's much more calm in the real world usually because everybody, kind of allows themselves to, I don't know, loosen themselves in the virtual world.
Right. Can I throw in my 2 cents? recently, like, a couple of weeks ago, we went. Actually, it's no. I don't know if you can, but if you can invite Gallium because he has an interesting story. To
You can't request an invite?
No. Well, he can. He just. I've been having a very hard time getting a hold of him.
All right, go ahead.
We've been organising a Simmer and Kane decided to come over to the UK, and we decided to have a meetup with Orcal, Gallium, Fox Mulder, Lolafon, and myself. I think someone else. Yeah, and to those that I can spread my wings and I can push them out over here and there. I normally do this to protect myself from the sun, but I've been doing this so much, and now it's becoming summer. When I go out and I hit the sun over here, I'm just like, okay, wing activate. Okay, this is kind of weird. The sun isn't being blocked out, and I kind of felt that as well during the meetup as well. There were these times when we were walking around Piccadilly Circus.
Yes.
And I was just like, I have to turn my play space. Wait, I don't have to do that. There was actually also this really surreal point as well where we were at a restaurant and I was just sitting down and I was just like letting everything go around and I was just like putting my fingers around my head like I was gonna take out my headsets because it kind of felt like a blurring of the two worlds at a point.
Do you think also I have audio delay, so I'm really hoping I'm not interrupting people. Do you think that it's because you were with other people who you're used to spending time in VR chat? Because that's exactly the phenomenon that I had with Mr. Q and Q Paradox at the conference. We were walking around, but because they were talking and I was so used to like their voices were cues for me to be in the virtual world that it felt like, and this is also to Rubik, what Rubik was saying too, like, do you think that also your personality that in VR chat comes out more when you're meeting people from VR chat than it would if you're just meeting other people in real life and how your personality would be with those people? Like, do you think it kind of elicits the context, the social context is the same people from VR chat, so does that elicit these physiological experiences and the social dynamic of like who you are in here versus in real life?
I think the social dynamics are the same, but there's projection within VR chat.
Are you asking
that
Zircon
is,
for an answer?
Onto people that when you meet them, it's completely different.
It's
audio delay as well. So,
okay. To me, it was actually kind of the same. It was really interesting seeing Orcal not be Nightmare Fuel for once.
Wow,
and that made me accept him
normal human
more.
body.
Was his butt normal? That's the real question. So,
we don't talk about no.
No. It wasn't normal. Wow. Okay.
But yeah, every time I think about them, I just think about their VR chat avatars. And there's just we still just get up to stupid stuff as well. Like we just come up with the weirdest things to say. So to me, it's no different to virtual reality to real world. Apart from you don't have to spend money and effort going to places. There was actually just a really funny story. I think it was really funny because I had a fucking breakdown. But I was just like, we were at a Costa Coffee. Kane really wanted afternoon tea and scones. We were traveling all across London to find a place that served tea. And it was sort of like a got and mouse chase. Every time we got to a place
finding
shut
a place
down.
that sold tea in London. Let's go back to the real question here, because I feel like the BBC has lied to to America
Seriously.
for a while now. I
Threw
just
all the
assumed
tea
that
in
was like
the Thames, so there's nothing left. That's why it's.
I just assumed that instead of water fountains, they just had tea fountains. That was a thing. I'm totally lost now.
Pretty much, yeah. It rains.
A little bit, yeah.
What kind of LSD have you been taking?
Just the ones. Just
I want
what
some.
BBC tells me. I'm just following what.
Yeah, but and we were just outside of Costa, and I was just talking to Simmer about something as well, and Gallium was just like standing there, just staring at us blankly, and then he just like blinked and then twitched his head, and it's like, okay, I might have blanked out because I just heard it's better to spend an hour as an eagle than a lifetime as a Dorito. And then I was like, I throw my hands up, and then I just like walked across the road, and I passed a tree, and I just decided I'm gonna hug this tree, and I'm just gonna sob against it, and I'm just gonna just I don't even know what was going on.
Spending a
people
lifetime as a
thought,
Dorito.
There the fuck you are! I've been trying to get a hold of you for ages.
I've literally I only just got the invite.
Your chat.
Okay. Do you want to tell a story about the veto line?
Well, do you want my side of this story?
Yeah.
We need it.
Because I don't really have all the details.
Okay, so sorry if there's some duplicate information here, but
do a backflip.
oh right, 1 second.
I'm gonna do one as well.
Backflip time.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, we were in where Lolathon was just checking into a hotel.
Yeah.
And there was a we were looking for somewhere just to have something for just like a quick drink or a snack or something. Everywhere we could find was shut. So we'd ended up just waiting outside. I think it was a Costa, was it? Something like that. Talking about some stuff. I was talking to someone else, and just out of the corner of my ear, I guess, similar to out of the corner of my eye, but I hear him saying sort of, it's better to live an hour as an eagle than a lifetime as a dare. I thought he said Dorito, and I'm just thinking, wait, what? Didn't say anything. It's about, I was like, okay, wait, now I need to know. What, did I hear that right? Did you say it's better to live a lifetime as an eagle than an hour as an eagle than a lifetime as a Dorito? And that was it. He just, like what I'm sure he's already said, it's just laughs really loud twice, hands up, walks off, crosses the road blindly. At that point, I was actually a little bit concerned for his life. Well, more for the fact that we'd have to explain how.
Truthfully, the Dorito almost killed him.
And I thought that so as with a lot of roads in London, there's like sort of trees along them, multiple trees, and there was one just past sort of the road. So I thought he was just going to kind of stop there, but no, he keeps on going. And at this point, the rest of us were just paying attention. We're just like, what is he gonna? Oh god, I think we've lost him. Gets up, and then he just kind of gives up against the tree, and then we do lose him because he blends into the tree because of the cover of his coat, like a fucking moth.
So you guys have obviously met in real life, but like, do you see each other in real life often, or just 2 times, right?
Just the twice. No, and not often. We're kind of halfway opposite ends of the country.
Yeah. Was that weird? Like, was the initial meeting, was that something that you would like? What was that like for you? Because I know for like myself, I'm a pretty outgoing person in the real world, and yet when I started in VR chat, like I found myself to be really shy. Like I wouldn't talk to people. I would just kind of like wander from group to group. I wasn't really sure what to do. Didn't really, kind of entered in a default avatar, and you're just kind of like, hi? Hi, psych. Oh, maybe he can't hear me. I'm gonna go talk.
First time we ever met, it was in a Costa Coffee running theme.
Yeah.
And I was running really, really late, actually. You were just waiting for me.
Yeah, because technically the first meetup wasn't a pure VR chat meetup because there were a bunch of people from Altspace that we knew.
Just kidding.
No one's gonna hold that against you, right? Well, maybe a few people will. I won't hold that against you.
It's okay.
If you want to hold it against me, at least take your clothes off first. Anyway.
Oh hell yeah.
Yeah. So I was just like, I finally got to the place, and I just like look at these group of people, and I see them all stare back at me. We're both thinking the same thing. Oh, is this Gallium and the others? Oh, is this Zircon? And I just go up and say, okay, what does 5-6 mean to you?
I think I wanted to slap you.
Someone shouted 5-6 back.
That might have been Richie.
It probably was witchy.
That
Yeah, that was
might
the
have
other
I
one.
been
remember hearing
glitchy.
that story about how the meme moved into the real world and they could use it to
Yeah, I have
identify
a
each other.
5-6 T-shirt
Mm.
now. It's great. Owlboy gave it to
Yeah.
me.
It's like
That's
a
funny.
non-cringy version of that whole Reddit one. Like, what's it? Something to do with
Rubik?
fucking bacon?
It's funny because this situation always, as a out what did you say? I don't know. As someone who hasn't seen this happen, it's in some years, in a few years, we might actually see people describe situations they've had in VR chat as if it was the real world. Like you could almost see that situation happen with Gallium's avatar and Zocron's avatar, like going in the map and looking for a cafe, and Zocron blending in a tree, like with a animation override or something. So I don't know. It's funny to imagine that in the future,
Recreate that
people might have
Dorito.
stories to tell people over the around a campfire, just stuff that happens.
Well, and eventually, go ahead.
Well, we should start heading towards a conclusion. So I want to hear more stories of people who have met each other. Like that's what I really want to hear as we start to close out. And we'll announce that. But what were you about
Do
to
we
say?
have any
Sorry.
more like highlighting stories?
We've got Nuki here, but that's for the Ohio. But trying to think what yeah, I'm trying to think.
Is Owlboy here? Owlboy.
Where's Owlboy?
What? Hello.
I see you.
What? Nobody else from Orlando is here?
Oh boy.
Oh, look, here's an Owlboy. No, I guess we'll go to the station.
Oh, nobody else is here from Orlando? Okay. It was a lot of fun. There were a lot of people. There were 22 people.
Nice. That's a lot.
It was. I don't know. I don't know what other people have been saying tonight, but from what I've experienced multiple times now, it's awkward for a moment, and then you realize, oh, it's the same person I've been hanging out with for months, and then everything's normal and fine. So
yeah, you don't really like bump into someone that you've talked to and hear him and find out like, oh, you're a racist. Like that's not a conversation. Like you kind of that before because you've talked to him for like hours on end. You're like, okay, you kind of do get that idea of a personality. But I do wonder if there's like, I mean, I guess Owlboy, I've never met you in person, but I'm assuming that you don't look like your avatar, as much as Syke looks like his avatar. So I guess it'd be kind of interesting to put the face to the voice and the personality, and that could potentially be like an initial shock or surprise. But then I think
it's the same personality.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh, okay, this
Fall
gets.
asleep. We're wrapping up, Syke. Just a few more minutes. Hang on.
Sorry. I wasn't yawning.
But yeah, I mean, to see that many people, I think in real world from VR chat.
I'm just lagging. I'm sorry. I don't know when I'm talking
you're
and when I'm not
lagging
because every audio is delayed.
But I would assume that would be kind of a little bit of an awe-inspiring moment, at the end of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Honestly, we found for Orlando, what we did is and for Orlando, for anybody who doesn't know, it was a meetup that happened last October. We went down to Orlando, Florida, because a few people live in Florida. And we've been talking about how a Disney trip would be the kind of thing we should do, because it's like VRC, right? There's all these different fake places we could go together, and rides are fun and whatever. But what we ended up finding was that we preferred hanging out with each other and talking more than the hassle and the planning and the structure of the parks. On Saturday, we had a cookout, and that ended up being everybody's favorite part of it, because it was just us doing what we do in VRC, which is hanging out and talking. So I don't know, it might have been a little bit different if VRC was all about us hanging out and playing games together or doing other activities together, but at that point, most of it was just, oh, we hang out and chat. So that's what we want to do here, and that's great. And it was a lot of fun. So
that's cool.
I recommend that kind of thing.
Chemistry, you had your hand up.
Moment passed.
Okay, you're passed.
It was probably a hilarious joke.
It probably was fantastic. Yeah. Timing's totally broken.
Yes, Ghoster.
Yes.
Are you unmuted?
unmute myself.
Get ready, stream. You're gonna hear him.
Yes, you're gonna be able to hear me louder than everybody else because that's just how it works here. Anyway, so I was a part of the Ohio meetup that happened last year as well.
Ghoster,
kinda
calm
around
down. You're being too loud.
the same time as what was it? When did you do VR Orlando? Wasn't that like October or so, Owlboy? Wherever you are.
That is what he just said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. But so we did the Ohio meetup in August, and we went to a place here in Ohio called Cedar Point. If you guys have heard it, it's like one of the biggest roller coaster parks in America.
Oh yeah.
And fortunately enough,
sorry, I have to interrupt. The reason that Verlando happened was because I was whining and complaining that I couldn't go to that one because I had something else going on, and that prompted us to finally get shit together and make Florida happen. So.
But anyway, so like there is 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there's about 7 us here in Ohio, and just strictly Northeast Ohio. So we only live like an hour's drive away from Cedar Point, and we loved it. So we said, why not invite a few people, and we'll all meet up there. We had a big party at Sim and Kane's house. The ones that went over to Europe recently. We had a big party at their house. We all slept over, and then the next morning we woke up. Still partially drunk, and we went to Cedar Point for the entire day, from sun up to sundown. And we had a bunch of fun. We used the phrase 5-6 as our calling card because we knew nobody else would know it. So if like one person stopped or one person got lost, we'd literally just shout 5-6, and everybody would look back, stop, see what's going on, and then when we're starting again, like to start walking to go to the next place, we'd shout out 5-6 because 5-6 hadn't come out yet. And so we used that 5-6 calling card, as some people say, or used it in real life. And then we also got to meet everybody. And Atari, to answer your question that you're probably going to ask is, how was the shock of, trying to meet everybody? For me, I only had issues with 2 people, Double Goose and Coro Bravin. Their voices sounded so similar that I couldn't actually tell them apart until I got to know their personality. But
interesting.
I mean, other than that, I kind of already knew everybody, and that was the nice part about it. We are.
Yeah, I would think the personality would sort of translate, right?
I would sure hope so. But again, it's like I mentioned earlier, like when I first came in, I was super shy, and then finally kind of broke out of that, and
you're lying.
I can't. Is there a sarcasm slash there?
Sorry.
But I don't know. I feel like I do kind of feel like people get the ability to maybe alter their ability how they'd want it to alter. And so I that's the thing that interests me is like, okay, if you meet a person who's super outgoing inside of VR chat and you meet them in real world and they're shy, is there like, does that not happen because you know each other in this side? Does that then cross over? How does that transfer? That's kind of been what's interesting about, like, if hanging out with Psych in the real world at the meetup, it's all about the meetup, right? Every time that we talk, it's about, VR, where it's going, what it means for our city, what he's studying, and then what we're building, and hey, come over to the studio, or we're going to get ready for this meetup. But then if we're like hanging out in VR chat, it's never about that. It's always about, just being normal. Like, it's just normal stuff. It's like a normal hangout stuff, So I think that there's something to that where, things do get a little bit different in the real world. But I don't know. Everyone's different. So who knows?
I think we're going to wrap it up. Oh, Ghoster?
One quick.
Oh, Gallium.
Just quick story about what you were just saying about how, at least what I thought you were just saying. Quick story. Last year, I've been to 3 VR meetups, and last year I met up with 2 friends. Again, this is from Meatspace, but same things applies. And this was at, oh god, it was at another bloody theme park. Okay, there's a running theme here. And it was a friend of mine from up Scotland who'd organised it. And the way she didn't tell us until after, but she'd specifically organised it in a way that we'd only have about two and a half hours together. And her reasoning behind it was because she's, in terms of like sort of social anxiety, it's a bit of a thing. And she, in the physical world, struggles with it a little bit. So it was a kind of a time-based, if this is weird, at least I've only have to handle it for this long, and then sort of forcibly bailed out because I think she had to go with some other friends for something. And she completely regretted it because it wasn't weird, because all the time that she'd spent, which wasn't that long, it was only a couple of months in VR in general with, it was me and Richie again that she met up with. And it wasn't weird at all. If anything, it was slightly weirder for me because in alt space, everyone's basically at the same eye height, which is interesting kind of concept of leveling things. But physically, she was like about this tall. It was bizarre, almost always hearing her voice coming from a lower angle rather than at least the same one. So, but I think, again, what you're saying, it depends on each person for if it's makes it less or more easy or blur. It's 4 a.m. I don't know where my brain's going.
I have one thing to add before we wrap
All right.
up.
Oh my God! Oh, he's speaking.
Yes, I'm speaking. After having listened to everybody's stories and having listened to how people feel about the real world versus the virtual world, what it seems like to me what it boils down to is all about managing expectations. Like when you're out in the real world, you are expected to be a certain way. You expect people to be a certain way. You expect the world to react in exactly the way it has always reacted for the whole of your life. And then you come into something like this. And this is something that really struck me about any social VR platform. It really struck me about Rec Room. The first time I walked into a social VR place, I had no expectations. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what it was going to be about. And when I walked into this common room and saw people running around and literally kids screaming, I kind of had a panic attack. I was not expecting to be thrust into a social situation. Whereas now, having come into VR chat, having come into Rec Room, I expect things to be a certain way. So I expect certain things to be in places, I expect people to be a certain way. But when I come into VR chat, I don't always expect to see 50-foot tall, scantily clad anime girls that have the head of Hank Hill. That's just what it's like here sometimes. You know, it's I do now. I most certainly do now. But initially I didn't. I had no expectations. So I think going back to Atari's point of someone pulling off the headset and coming back into the real world and being slightly depressed, they expected things to be more colorful. They expected things to be more pleasant to be around and to look at. This is just a general observation. I'm not writing like a master's thesis on this or anything, but just from having listened to everybody, it seems like all this is just managing expectations.
If I start talking, then I'm going to talk over people.
And that's it.
I can't.
Okay. Well, sorry, Minerva, were you going to add to that?
I was trying to add to something a while back, actually, but I guess my checkmark never got recognized.
Sorry.
I mean, my exclamation point.
Let's jump back really
So
quick. What were you going to say?
it's not relevant in this immediate time frame. But what I was saying, how your chat affects your like real life, like when you imagine, oh, you take off the headset and you're like, ah, I want to paint with my fingers, or I want to do this. I find that the people I interact with, a lot of people will have things like anime characters. It's obviously super popular in VR chat for avatars. And I found, since I started into like the role-playing groups, my friends have found this as well, because my character, whenever I roleplay, I do have the body of Sailor Moon, like they watch Crystal and they're like, why is she so nice? Like, I can't watch this anymore because I expect them to be lewd and savage and just like destroy someone's day, but then make them their friend afterwards. And like for me, there's a couple of anime that are brand new I've never watched before. I'm like, oh, awesome, Funimation, Crunchyroll, things like that. And I pop them up and I'm just like, that's not how you sound. And it's just like, it's because my friend wears that body. And I'm just like, I can't respect you. I can't see you as that character. I can't get into this damn anime. And there's a whole host of items and things that I just look and I'm like, you're like, I'll never be able to look at goldfish again. Aquafina, like water. There's just so many things. Lasagna from that freaking world. I'll never be able to look at certain things again because of my association with the person or thing in VR chat. And I'm like, FML. It's pretty crazy. I'm like, this character doesn't sound like this. What's going on? You're not you. And I just clicked to the next anime. And that's all I wanted to say was how like when you associate something so strongly with something you interact every day, you come across it in real life and you're like, what?
Problems.
What's going on?
Rubik, what were you gonna say?
I wanted to bounce on Slosh's point with the expectations. I don't know if you guys have seen any picture of a Reddit meetup. It's basically a really wide variety of people who meet up to talk about Reddit. And from what I got in the comments, it's extremely awkward because what people do there is discuss what they don't have in the real world is Reddit. And so they discuss about posts they've seen, stuff they saw, they watched, the stuff they said. And so it's, to me, I think at some point VR chat meetups are going to be this. It's going to be a lot of people from a lot of different places that are going to meet up and talk about stuff that they can't see, they can't, play. Like, it's going to be really weird because all the interactions they're going to have, all the stuff they're going to do as a group, all the people they're going to meet, they're going to have like a lot of, basically if you go with someone on the moon and you fight like dinosaurs with lasers and then you meet up and you're in a cafe and nothing's going on, you might feel like a dissociation between the two experiences and you might feel a bit disappointed. And so the crazier VR chat is going to become, I hope the real life experiences between people is not going to be lessened by that crazy experiences you get in VR chat.
If I could bounce off of what you're... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Bouncing off something else.
I don't even know when people are. Sorry, I'm just gonna.
You're good. Go ahead.
I think also the thing is that these are authentic experiences. So even if you're sitting in a cafe with someone, like the rapport and the relationship that you have with that person is in the context of the fact that you did go to the moon and shoot things and all those kinds of things. So I think that it's cool because we're actually, and that's why all of this stuff is like who you want to be in VR chat. Like we conceptualize this as, oh, you're someone else in the virtual world. But really how I see this is that VR chat is enabling new possibilities of ways that we can develop ourselves, and I think of ourself as a full yes, Iron Giant, and ourself is continually like changing from our virtual experiences. So I think it's like this continuous self-development that's occurring even in the virtual space as well, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to finish my thought from earlier on where we're talking about as we move into here and we escape from reality. Like, do you guys sort of speculate in the future? Like, what ultimately, where does this go in 100 years? Like, if are we leaning towards...
All dead.
Well, let's assume we're all alive. Are we leaning towards, like, my assumption would be something like this. People are more used to virtual reality than real reality. Right? Or is that way off to say in 100 years?
No, I think that's extremely accurate. I mean, at least for me, in a way, we're kind of already proving that point with watching people. People are convinced, and this is, I mean, I know not everyone here is in the U.S., but I'm speaking from a U.S. perspective here, okay? But in the U.S., people are just convinced the stuff that they see in their own Facebook feeds is the real world. And that's how the entire world feels, because Facebook is built as an algorithm to feed them back things that elicit a response. And so you know, there's an entire generation of people who are able to look at Facebook and recognize that that's not the case. But there's also an entire generation who's absolutely convinced that their Facebook feed is their reality. So
Alongside
there's
Snapchat filters.
Yes, of course. But even to like the Snapchat filters, like there's a Snapchat filter that like slenders your face and makes you a little bit more attractive, and you know there's like, and everyone knows what I'm talking about. There's an attractive Snapchat filter. To then change the reality.
I don't know.
Well, but you know,
I'll be doing
like,
that to other people in real life.
What's Snapchat?
That's
Those girls don't have ears and noses. Damn it!
Yeah, I know. But it's an alteration of our reality, and we start setting expectations based on that, right? We start setting an expectation on this reality of okay, this is what I'm being fed, so this must be true, and therefore this is the reality, and this is how I'm going to go act out in the real world. And if you're wondering if there'll ever be a time where this area is more real than that, yeah, I think you're already seeing it. I said this with Gunter, and I'd say it with Psych. Like, you guys are putting together like live streams where people are having real conversations and saying real things. And if that's not bringing reality into it, like this entire conversation is a very real look of like, are we taking a healthy approach to bringing VR into the real world? So does that answer? I mean, like, I feel like that answers my opinion on that.
Yeah, that's good. We got it.
I have a nugget.
All right, this is the final thought, Zircon. We're getting tired.
Nugget time.
It's like 5 in the morning where you are.
Golden nugget.
No,
Go away. Good one.
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
All right, go ahead. Is that it?
That was it.
No.
Shit nugget.
No.
All right, we did it. Okay, so
Yeah, wait, I think Gur had a final thought. I think.
Oh my
Just
god.
got one
final thought.
All right, you're gonna close this down.
This is the final thought.
That's fair. Here, hold on. I got this. There we go. Here we go. That's nice. Cool. So the one thing I found, because funny enough, one of my favorite things to do is research. Surprise, surprise to Atari over there. But there's one thing I've studied past. Yeah, thank you. One thing I've studied past the research he actually knows me to conduct, and that is actually on the topic of something called the Magic Circle. The Magic Circle is pretty simple. Basically, it's a bunch of people getting together and deciding that they want to play a game and that they'll let reality bend in order to allow for these rules to actually work for them. VR is essentially an extension of said Magic Circle upon our lives, and that currently we're in a very modernist state of VR where basically we're just trying to throw stuff at a wall and see what sticks. You could think of it a lot like a pendulum, where the pendulum's swinging this way really fat, really hard, and everybody's like, oh, VR is the greatest thing in the world. Well, eventually it's going to swing over into postmodernism where everybody's like, oh, wait, it's actually complete garbage. And there'll be a lot of irony and there'll be a lot of subversion, things like that. And eventually it's going to settle in the middle and where we just integrate it as part of our normal lives. So to that all for me to say that I'm not necessarily sure that we're going to live in VR, but rather we're just going to integrate it into our everyday lives. And maybe in terms of something a little more like MR or something akin to that. But I don't necessarily think, I think in the beginning, people are going to be absorbed completely into virtual reality. I think that is an absolute possibility and a reality right now. But at a point in the future, we're just going to integrate it into what we normally do as if it's an all everyday thing that you just do.
It's becoming more and more part of our self-development.
Exactly.
That's something I'm taking away from this episode. Yeah.
Are we going to let this person have a final thought?
Sorry, listen. I'm actually writing a book about online social networking, and it's a good thing that I've popped into this little place. VR Chat is an online social platform full of people who project the best of them and hide the worst of them. This is a big problem, simply because when you know someone and you become emotionally connected to them, you're not effectively sharing yourself. This is why. Am I okay?
Nope, that's not helping at all.
Everyone gather around the wall.
No, if I'm too quiet, don't worry about it.
I should have chromia.
I still can't
You're
hear
loud
you.
enough.
Good. Now I'll let someone else the last voice.
Actually, you sound clearer now.
Block avatars if you can. Your internet connection is not hanging up. Yeah, just block avatars.
But no, I'm writing a book about online social networking, and there's a lot of things to consider here. Simply because you're not really expressing who you really are online.
You can come on stage too. Now we can.
Nah, I'm all good. Don't worry about it. It's all good, guys. I'll see all of you anyway later. I'll always explain it later. I've got a perfect set for it.
Shit. All right.
I'm
what
actually
does that mean? Are we
at
giving
work.
up?
Sorry, I'm actually at work. I would have VR, but I'm at work.
Well, post it. We have if you go to endgamevr.com, you can post it in the Deep Thoughts Discord as well. It sounds like you're writing a book and want to talk about this, which is really cool. So we should, yeah. All right.
Let's do a group
I don't
picture.
even
We're writing
know.
about
There's
VR
so many
Club.
audio
I'm part of it
delays.
too.
I don't even know who's talking, what's happening. So
All right, I'm gonna say,
let's do.
Yeah, it was great. Everyone's great. Let's all line up on the stage. Let's get everybody up here.
Okay.
Oh, hey, can go on stage now.
I got an idea.
Oh yeah, we need the music. People are people inside VR or not.
Tiny avatars in the
Exactly.
front.
Yes, boy. That's a great nugget. People are people inside of VR or not.
Can I stand on top of this thing while doing the shots, though?
You might not be in frame.
Can I spread my wings and that's okay?
Oh, I'm on the
Yes.
I have so much lag right now. Alright. I'm just gonna go here and crouch. There we go. Hey.
There we go.
I'm flying. Meet me IRL. Did someone say fight me IRL?
Yes, I heard fight me.
Meet me IRL.
Bye. Make me a BLT.
I'm in that picture.
Yay.
Fight me IRL.
Hey guys. Thanks guys.
Okay.
That was great.
Cubes everywhere.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks.
I'm gonna leave this world.
No, it's a lot of fun.
Nice.
What is
God,
this?
I don't even want
I'm
to know.
sorry.
Let's go!
Portal. Oh wow, it's like an exact same.
Are there Doritos through here?
Oh.
It's like an alternate universe.
Only setting up expectations.
Portal. Yeah, extremely high.
Trashed.
How you doing, Nicholas?
That's what you look like in real life.
Very close to this. It's not really.
With that reshade information.
Very close.
I'm working on it.
I don't